My mom demanded I skip my award ceremony to serve food at my brother's engagement dinner. Snapping, "Your little prize means nothing beside his future." She threatened to stop paying my rent. She didn't know I had already paid a year in advance. I walked in with the envelope she never expected. "My name is Garrett. I'm 27. I work as a credit analyst at a regional bank holding company in Indianapolis, and I have been doing that job for 3 years. What I do, specifically, is review commercial credit applications, small businesses, mid-sized manufacturers, the occasional real estate developer. I look at their financials, and I tell my firm whether or not they can pay back what they're asking to borrow. I do this by modeling cash flow, projecting income, expenses, and variables over 12 to 60 months and identifying exactly where things break down. I am good at this. 8 months ago, I led the restructuring of a credit facility for a regional manufacturer that was 90 days behind on a $12 million loan. The company employed over 300 people. 11 small businesses in the supply chain depended on them staying current. We renegotiated terms, extended the maturity, restructured the covenant package, and got the whole chain back to current inside 90 days. My VP, Douglas Kern, flew in from Chicago for my award ceremony because of that deal. He does not fly in for things that don't matter. I keep a dark blue work bag by my front door. It is packed the night before, every night. Inside it at any given time, my laptop, my charger, a notepad, 2 pens, and whatever documents I am currently tracking. For 11 weeks, there was also an envelope. My brother Nate is 30. He has never paid rent to my mother. Not once, not for a single month, not for a single week. After he graduated college, he moved back into the family home in Indianapolis and lived there for 22 months. My mother cooked for him. She did his laundry twice a week. She kept the pantry stocked with a specific brand of cereal he has eaten since he was 9 years old. When relatives asked about him, she said he was getting on his feet. Nobody asked what that meant or how long it would take. It was understood to be a temporary condition that required no further examination. I moved out at 22. Month 1, she called and told me the apartment 2 miles from the family home was available. Her property. Did I want it? I said yes. She told me the rent was $1,000 a month. I didn't ask what the market rate was. I had just started the job. I was grateful for the unit, and asking felt like the wrong tone for the conversation. I said yes again and set up the automatic transfer for the first of every month. I found out later that comparable units in that zip code were going for $875. The extra $125 a month was what she charged me for being the son who didn't need anything. I will give you 3 other examples because I want to be precise about what I'm describing. This was not a feeling. This was a pattern with receipts. Easter 3 years ago, my mother asked me to come home and help with the food. I drove 40 minutes, moved the dining room furniture, set up 6 folding chairs from the garage, sliced a ham, arranged a fruit tray, and washed the serving dishes before the meal and all the regular dishes after. I was in that kitchen for close to 3 hours. Nate and his girlfriend at the time sat in the living room the entire afternoon and watched television. At one point, I walked past the doorway carrying a tray, and my mother looked up from the table and said, "You're so capable, Garrett." She meant it as a compliment. It landed like a job description. My college graduation, she gave me a card. I still have it somewhere in a box I have not opened since the last move. The front has a diploma illustration and the words "You did it" printed in blue. Inside she wrote, "So proud. Love, Mom." That was the entirety of it. 6 weeks later, Nate graduated high school. She bought him a used Camry. It had 108,000 miles on it, but it ran fine and it was red, and he drove it for 4 years. I asked once, gently, why the difference? She said, "You're more independent. You don't need the same support." I didn't ask again. I filed it under things that are true about my family and moved on. Christmas 2 years ago, Nate mentioned at dinner that he wanted to take a trip to New Orleans with some friends in the spring. My mother said, "Between the rolls and the main course, I'll cover the flight, just tell me the dates." Just like that. No deliberation, no pause, no sense that this was a decision being made. It was already decided. The same way the tablecloth color was already decided. Nate said thanks and went back to his food. I was sitting 4 feet away. Nobody looked at me. I helped myself to more sweet potatoes and said nothing, because there was nothing productive to say. The accounting was the accounting. There was also this. The week I got promoted from associate analyst to full analyst, which came with a title change, a salary bump, and a note from Douglas Kern in my personnel file. I had closed more deals in my first year than any associate in the region's history. I called home to tell them. My father said congratulations and asked if the hours would get better. My mother said, "That's great, honey. Your brother is thinking about going back for his IMBA." I told him we'd help with the application fees. She was not being cruel. She was just running the ledger in real time, and the new entry was Nate's potential IMBA. My promotion was already filed under done, and therefore no longer requiring resources. I said that sounded like a good opportunity for him. I meant it. Then I got off the phone and went back to the credit memo I had been working on before I called. The first phone call about the engagement dinner came 8 days before my awards ceremony. She called me at 6:40 on a Wednesday evening. I was finishing a credit memo. She said, "Your brother's engagement dinner is Saturday the 19th. I need you there at 4 to help set up and then run the bar during the meal." She said it the way she schedules things, not as a request, as a fact that had already been established and simply needed to be communicated. I told her my award ceremony was that same Saturday, the Regional Banking Association honor. Douglas Kern flying in from Chicago. She paused for about 2 seconds. Then she said, "You could at least contribute to your brother's night." Just like that. Casual. The way you remind someone they forgot to take out the recycling. I told her I'd think about it. I did not think about it. What I thought about instead was the rent. 24 months. $1,000 on the first, every first, auto transfer, no missed payments, no exceptions. In 24 months, she had not sent me a single text to confirm a payment had arrived. Not one. Not a got it, not a thumbs up, not a hey. Saw it come through. The money moved from my account to hers the way electricity moves. Expected, invisible, and only worth noticing when it stops. She had been receiving $1,000 a month from her son for 2 years and had not once said thank you. I filed that number away. 24 months. 0 acknowledgments. I did not bring it up at the time. 9 days before the dinner, I drove to the family home to return a roasting pan I had borrowed in October for a dinner I hosted. It was a Tuesday evening, just past 7. I had the pan in a brown paper bag. I knocked. My dad, Kofi, answered. He's 57, quiet in the way that reads as patience, but that I have come to understand is something closer to a long-practiced avoidance of anything that might require him to pick a side. He said my mother was out back and stepped aside to let me in. I set the bag down in the hallway and walked toward the back of the house. The screen door to the back porch was cracked open about 4 inches. My mother was standing near the railing with her phone to her ear. I stopped. I could not see who she was talking to. I still don't know. But I heard her clearly, and I remember the exact order because I stood in that hallway and I did not move. She said, "Garrett can't afford to be difficult. He knows where his rent comes from. I keep him stable. That's the arrangement. He'll be there." A pause. The other person spoke. My mother nodded once, slowly then. "I've been supporting him for 2 years. He's not going to make a scene over a work dinner. He's practical. He understands how things work." Another pause. Then, "Patricia's family is going to be there. I need this night to go right. I can't have him being difficult about something that happened to fall on the same day." Something that happened to fall on the same day. That was the phrase she used for Douglas Kern flying from Chicago. For the Whitmore restructuring. For 8 months of work and 11 businesses and a plaque with my name on it. Something that happened to fall on the same day. I stood in that hallway for close to 20 seconds. The paper bag was at my feet. There was a framed photo on the wall to my left. Nate at his high school graduation, the red Camry visible in the background. I have stood in this hallway hundreds of times. I had never looked at that photo and registered what was not in it. In the kitchen, I could hear my father running water and then filling his coffee cup. He did not come into the hallway. He did not turn around. He filled his cup, and he stayed where he was. I picked up the bag. I walked to the kitchen and set the pan on the counter without taking it out of the bag. I said, "Brought the pan back." My dad said, "Thanks." He was looking at his coffee. He did not look up from it. I said goodnight. I let myself out. I did not close the door loudly. I sat in my car in the parking lot of my building for about 12 minutes. The engine was off. I could see my breath in the cold. I did not turn the heat on. Then I went inside. I opened my work bag and pulled out the wire confirmation I had printed 11 weeks earlier and placed in the bag the same afternoon. 1 page on bank letterhead. Summary at the top. 12 months of prepaid rent, account numbers, transfer dates, building address, landlord name. Len, below that, a full printout of all 12 transfers already on record, with the routing confirmed. I had prepaid the year because I got a small bonus in September and ran my own numbers the way I run client numbers. Rent was the largest fixed variable in my monthly cash flow. I modeled it out and realized I could eliminate it entirely. Not reduce it. Eliminate it. By prepaying in one lump wire. I called Len and asked if he could accept a prepayment covering the next 12 months. He said sure. I wired the amount that afternoon. He emailed a written confirmation the next morning. I printed it, moved it into an envelope, and put the envelope in my work bag labeled Q3 Household. I did not do this because I was planning anything. I did it because removing variables is my job, and I applied the same logic to my personal life that I apply to every commercial file I open. The variable was rent. I removed it. I moved on. I read the confirmation again at my kitchen table. The date. 11 weeks ago. The amount. 12 months. Len's signature at the bottom, slightly crooked the way signatures on email documents always are. I put it back in the envelope. She called me that evening. I watched my phone light up with her name. I let it ring. She said, "I hope you understand what this family has given you. I've always done what I thought was right. I hope you remember that when you make decisions." I listened to the voicemail once, standing in my kitchen with my jacket still on. Then I put the phone face down on the counter and made dinner. The next morning I moved the envelope from the Q3 Household folder to the inner breast pocket of my gray suit jacket hanging in my closet. That jacket has a pocket deep enough to hold a standard envelope flat without any visible outline through the fabric. I know this because I've carried term sheets and commitment letters in it before. Documents I didn't want folded before a meeting. It's a good jacket. I bought it 2 years ago for client-facing work, and I have never worn it to anything that didn't matter. I texted Nate, "I'll be there Saturday." He responded 3 minutes later, "Good, she'll calm down." I didn't reply to that. I did not call my mother. I did not send her a message. I did not tell anyone about the envelope or that it existed. It wasn't a secret. It was just not information anyone needed to have yet. There was a credit review the next morning. I prepared for that instead. She called Thursday evening. I answered. She opened with logistics. The dinner started at 6. She needed me there by 4. The bar cart was in the back closet. She had a list of what to buy. She would leave money on the counter. She delivered all of this the way she delivers most things, not as a request, as a schedule. A set of facts that had already been settled and simply needed to be communicated downward. I told her I had the award ceremony that Saturday. She said, "Your little prize means nothing beside his future." She said it without heat, without cruelty. The way you say something that seems obvious and you're mildly surprised still needs to be said out loud. In her accounting, a professional association award that did not involve her was a distraction from an event that did. Her son's engagement dinner was a family asset. A ceremony she had no part in planning and no role at was not. The math was simple, and she did not understand why I kept making it complicated. Then she said, "If you're not going to show up for this family, I'll stop covering your rent. See how manageable things are then." She said covering. That word specifically. She was not threatening to stop accepting my money. She had reframed 24 months of my automatic wire transfers as something she had been doing for me. In her version of the transaction, she was the generous party and I was the dependent one. The $125 above market rate that I had been paying every month had been quietly reclassified in her ledger as a subsidy. I had been paying above market to live in her property for 2 years, and she was describing that arrangement as her covering me. I want to be precise about this because it matters. She was not lying in the way liars lie. She was not strategically distorting the facts to manipulate me. She genuinely believed the version she was telling. The ledger in her head had been running this calculation for so long that the original entries no longer existed. What remained was the conclusion: she kept Garrett stable. That was a fact. The mechanism by which it had happened was a detail that had been absorbed into the larger truth. I let a beat pass. Not for effect. I was just making sure I had heard the words in the right order. I said, "Okay." She waited. She expected something after the okay. A follow-up, a question, a counter. I gave her nothing. Just the one word sitting there between us. I said, "I'll see you Saturday." And I hung up. 17 minutes later, Nate texted, "Just go to the dinner first and swing by the other thing after if you want. It's one day. She'll drop it by Sunday." He had called him before the line had cooled. I did not respond to Nate. She sent a text that evening. "I hope you understand what this family has done for you. I have always kept you stable. That is what mothers do for their children, and I have never done it with complaint." I read it. I put my phone face down on the nightstand. I went to sleep. I want to stop here for a second, because there is something I am not proud of. For 2 years, I paid $125 above market rate every single month, and I never once asked why. I noticed the number was high. I looked up comparable units in the zip code about 6 months in and saw the gap clearly. And I chose not to say anything because raising it felt like a confrontation I didn't want. And I told myself the difference was small enough that the peace was worth more than the clarity. That was wrong, not the amount. The silence. I handed her a credential she did not earn, because avoiding conflict felt easier than demanding accuracy. And she used that credential. She built a whole story around it, told it to people whose opinion mattered to her, and then tried to use it as a leash when she needed something from me. What I know now that I did not fully understand then: the people who benefit most from your patience are almost always the ones who will eventually point to that patience as proof that they own something. My silence was not neutrality. It was permission. I'm not saying this so you feel sorry for me. I'm saying it because if you are currently paying for something you never agreed to owe, the longer you stay quiet, the more the bill compounds. What comes next is the part where the invoice finally goes both directions. Stay with me. Friday morning, I was at my desk running comparables on a new client file when Bernard stopped by. Bernard is 32, 4 years at the firm, 2 rows over. He knocked on my doorframe and leaned against it. He said, "Hey, your mom called here twice last month." I picked up both times. She didn't leave a message either time. I looked up. Did she say who she was? First call, she said she was your emergency contact. Second call, she just said she was your mother. I said, "She hasn't been my emergency contact for 6 months." Bernard said, "Okay." He went back to his desk. That was the entire conversation. Bernard is not a man who needs extra words, and I appreciate that about him. I sat with that for a while. She had called my office twice, had not left a message either time. She was verifying whether the award was real, whether Douglas Kern was actually coming, whether the ceremony was the kind of event that would reflect badly on her for pulling me away from it. She was running intelligence on my professional life, using my own workplace as a source. and she still had not checked the lease. I opened my laptop. 2:15 meeting. I prepped for that instead. The ceremony was Saturday at 11. I wore the gray jacket. I had dry cleaned it Thursday. I pressed the collar myself Friday night because I don't trust dry cleaners with collars. Douglas Kern was already in the conference room when I arrived at 9:30. He stood when I came in and shook my hand and said, "The Whitmore restructuring is in our regional training materials now. Your name is on the case study." I said thank you. He said, "No, I mean that specifically. It's the example we use for distressed covenant restructuring in the Midwest region. That's why I came." 2 sentences. 8 months. 9 other honorees. We sat in a row at the front. They called my name third. I walked up, shook the chapter president's hand, and held the plaque with both hands for the photo. That's how you hold a plaque. Both hands. I was not thinking about my mother during any of this. I was thinking about Roland, the manufacturer's CFO, who had called me 6 weeks after closing and said his payroll had gone out on time for the first time in 4 months. He didn't say thank you in an elaborate way. He just said, "It went out on time." 4 words. That was the entire point of the work. After the luncheon, I walked to my car. The work bag was in the back seat. I transferred the envelope from the bag to the inner pocket of the gray jacket. I had been keeping it in the bag so there was no outline through the fabric during the ceremony photos. Now I put it back where it needed to be. I stood next to my car in the parking lot. Cold afternoon. The plaque was on the passenger seat. I looked at it for a second. Not in a meaningful way, just the way you look at something before you start the engine. Then I drove to the engagement dinner. I arrived at 6:03. 12 people at the table. My mother's side, her, my father Kofi, 2 family friends named the Adayemis, who she has known for 15 years and who are warm people and entirely uninvolved in any of this, and my Aunt Sylvia, who I see twice a year, and who is not a bad person, but who has not once in my adult life asked me a question that wasn't really a question about Nate. Camille's side, her mother Patricia, her father Gerald, Camille's younger sister Bria, and a college friend named Ren, who had flown in from Atlanta for the weekend. And then Nate and Camille at the head of the table, which was right. I came in, said hello to Camille first, shook Gerald's hand, nodded at the room. Found my seat near the middle of the table, across from Patricia. Unfolded the napkin and set it in my lap. My mother looked at me when I walked in. She looked at the jacket, then at my face. She did not say anything. We had soup first. A butternut squash she has been making at family dinners since I was 12. Then the main course, roasted chicken, vegetables, and a rice dish, with onions and tomatoes and some spice I have never been able to identify, no matter how many times I've tried to replicate it. The food was excellent. It is always excellent. Whatever else is true about my mother, she has never served a bad meal in her life. The conversation moved the way engagement dinner conversations move. Gerald asked about the wedding timeline. Patricia wanted to know about the venue deposit situation. Bria had strong opinions about color palettes. Ren, who had met Nate exactly twice, was charming and curious and seemed to genuinely like him, which I thought was a good sign for a person flying in from Atlanta for a near stranger's engagement dinner. Aunt Sylvia told a long story about her own wedding from 1987 that nobody had requested but that everyone listened to politely. Because that is what you do. I ate my soup, said the appropriate things when spoken to, listened to the table find its rhythm. Around the second course, my mother started talking. She does this at family events. She narrates, opens the ledger out loud so the room can see the balance and understand what it represents. It is not bragging exactly. It is accounting. Public accounting. With witnesses. She said, "I've always believed family is the investment that pays back in ways you don't expect. You put in what you have, and you trust that it grows." She looked at Nate and Camille and smiled, and it was a real smile. She does love Nate. I have never doubted that. Tonight is about what comes next. about what these two are building. And I want Patricia and Gerald to know that our family supports that completely. Patricia said that was wonderful. Then my mother said, some of us have had to carry more than others. And I don't say that with bitterness. That's just the nature of things. You carry what you have to carry, because that's what you do for the people you love. She was talking about me. Everyone at that table understood she was talking about me. Patricia glanced across at me briefly. The Adamis found something interesting in the centerpiece. Kofi looked at his food. Aunt Sylvia picked up her water glass. I reached into my jacket. I put the envelope on the table. I slid it to the center. Not toward her, not toward anyone in particular. Just to the middle of the table, in the open, where everyone could see it clearly. I did not stand up. I did not raise my voice. I did not wait for a pause. I said, this is 12 months of prepaid rent. Bank wire confirmations, transfer dates, account numbers, and written acknowledgement from my landlord. The payment was sent 11 weeks ago. There is no rent balance. There is no outstanding amount. There is nothing to stop, because there is nothing left to threaten. I said it the way I say things in a credit review. Factual, sequenced, no editorial. The table went quiet in the specific way that rooms go quiet when something irreversible has just been said. My mother looked at the envelope, then at me. Something moved behind her eyes. Not shock, not anger. Calculation. She was running a number she had not prepared to run. She reached for the envelope. I did not move my hand. But I did not let go of it either. My fingers rested on the edge, lightly, and she reached and registered the resistance and stopped. She pulled her hand back and looked at the table in front of her and did not look up. 30 seconds. I counted without meaning to. Patricia said, in a perfectly conversational tone, to no one specifically, I thought Garrett managed his own rent. Camille had mentioned that. She said it the way you confirm a fact you already knew was a fact. She was not trying to cause a scene. She did not know there was a scene. She had simply heard one version of something from her daughter and was noting that the other version on the table seemed to confirm it. She detonated it without knowing it was live. The table stayed quiet. Not the polite quiet of a dinner party finding a new subject. The specific quiet of 12 people deciding simultaneously not to be the next one to speak. Gerald looked at Camille. Camille looked at her hand. Bria set her fork down very quietly. Ren, who had no context for any of this, and was therefore the only person at the table, with no decision to make, looked calmly at the centerpiece. The Adiamas turned very slightly toward each other in the way that people who have been married long enough develop a private language of minor posture adjustments. My mother began to speak. Not to me, not to Patricia. To some point between the centerpiece and the serving dish. Her voice was entirely even. She said, I kept him stable. That was love. That's what I've always done. For both of them. That's what a mother does. I don't know what else anyone wanted from me. Admission, she paid. Reduction, paying was the entire definition of what she had. Incomprehension, she could not understand why the envelope changed anything, why her math didn't hold, why the ledger she had maintained so carefully was sitting on the table as evidence against her instead of in her favor. She believed it. That is the thing I keep coming back to. She had spent 27 years building a ledger where rent equaled support, and support equaled love. And in that ledger, she had been a good mother, a woman who kept her son stable, and she was baffled. Genuinely baffled. No one in the room seemed to be reading the same numbers. The envelope didn't change her math. It just showed the room that her math was the only math she had ever learned. My father looked at his water glass, reached for the pitcher, refilled it slowly, set the pitcher down. Nate said nothing. His jaw moved once like he had something prepared, and then he released it and looked at the tablecloth. Camille said nothing. She looked at her hands. Bria studied her plate. Ren looked at the centerpiece. The Adiamas had both turned very slightly in the direction of the window. Aunt Sylvia took a breath, thought about it, and then picked up her fork, which was the correct decision. I folded the envelope and put it back in my jacket pocket. I finished my meal. I helped myself to seconds of the roasted vegetables because they were very good, and I had not eaten since the luncheon at 11, and I was hungry. I had a second glass of water. I listened to Gerald ask about the rehearsal dinner location and the table carefully, slowly find its way back to something that functioned like a normal conversation. People are remarkably good at this when they want to be. After dinner, I found Camille in the kitchen wrapping leftovers. I told her the centerpieces were beautiful, and I meant it. She said she'd done them herself and wasn't sure about the branches. I said the branches were the right call. She said thank you. Then, quietly, I hope tonight wasn't too much. I said the food was excellent. We both knew what we were not talking about, and we were both fine leaving it there. I shook Gerald's hand on the way out. I found Wren near the door and told her it was nice to meet her. She said Indianapolis was better than she expected. I said most people say that. I shook Nate's hand at the door. He held it one beat longer than a normal handshake and looked at me the way he looks when he has something prepared and then decides not to say it. I did not speak to my mother before I left. Nate called 3 days later. He didn't apologize. Nate processes things by building a framework around them rather than sitting inside them, and an apology would have required him to sit inside Tuesday night in a way he wasn't ready to do. I understand that about him. I'm not saying it as criticism. He said, "Why couldn't you just let Saturday go? It wasn't that serious." I said, "My VP flew in from Chicago. It was the most significant professional event of my career so far." Silence on his end. Then I heard him exhale slowly. Not a sigh, more like a recalibration. Someone running a new number through an existing model and getting a result that doesn't match what they expected. Then, Mom told me it was a department thing, like an internal recognition. I said, "I know." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "I didn't know she called your office." I said, "I know that too." He said, after a pause, "Why didn't you just tell me?" "About the rent. About the prepayment." I said, "Because it wasn't your business to manage, and because I didn't want to put you in the middle of something you didn't need to be in the middle of." He was quiet again. He understood what I meant. He understood also that he had been in the middle of it regardless, positioned there without being told, used as a pressure point without being given the full picture of what the pressure was about. That was not his fault. But it was a thing that had happened to him, and he now had to account for it. We stayed on the line for another 30 seconds without either of us filling it. He said he had to go. I said okay. We hung up. Nate now has two versions of the story. He knows which one he received first. He knows who gave it to him and what purpose it served for her to give it to him that way. That's something he'll have to work out on his own schedule. I can't do that part for him, and I'm not going to try to speed it up. Camille texted 9 days after the dinner. She said, "I want you to know I didn't know about any of that. I hope you know that." I texted back, "I know. You walked into something that had nothing to do with you. Congratulations on the engagement. You and Nate are going to be fine." She said thank you and sent a small emoji that I took to mean she appreciated the lack of additional information. We haven't spoken since, but we're connected on LinkedIn. Her post suggests she is organized and follows through, which I think is the most important quality for what they're building. My mother sent a text 18 days after the dinner. "I hope you understand that I only ever wanted what was best for you. I have sacrificed a great deal, and I don't think that has always been recognized." I read it. Then I put the phone down. There was nothing to respond to that wouldn't extend something I had already finished. That text was not an apology or an opening. It was a restatement of the ledger in softer language. She gave. Therefore, she was right. Therefore, the envelope was an overreaction from someone who didn't understand what love costs. I had heard different versions of that sentence for 27 years. I did not need to answer it one more time. 7 months later, I closed another credit facility, regional food manufacturer, $8.7 million, 18-month restructure. I sent Bernard a Slack message at 4:17 on a Tuesday 2 in 1 year. He sent back, buy lunch. I did. The sandwich place 2 blocks from the office. Turkey for me, roast beef for him. We talked about a client file he was working on with a complicated guarantor structure. It was a normal lunch. I drank water and ate my sandwich and looked out the window at the street and thought about nothing in particular. I moved apartments 4 months ago. New unit, different zip code, 300 square feet larger. A second bedroom I use as an office. The building is newer. The super responds to maintenance requests inside 48 hours. His name is not. The rent is $950 a month and the lease is in my name, signed by no one else, with no history attached to it and no family property record in the chain. I set up the auto transfer for the first of the month, same as always. It goes to a landlord who emailed me the executed lease and move-in confirmation within 24 hours of signing. He has never suggested that receiving my rent payment constituted a form of love. He has never suggested it constituted anything other than a financial transaction between 2 adults who agreed to terms. This is the correct way to rent an apartment. The plaque is on my desk, not the wall. The desk, where I can see it when I'm working. Kern signed the back of it before he flew. I asked him directly if he does that for everyone. He said no, he doesn't. It sits at the edge of my desk near the monitor, face up, engraving catching the light from the window. I also keep the email from Roland, the CFO from the Whitmore restructuring, in a folder on my desktop. It has 3 sentences. The last one is payroll went out on time. I read it sometimes before a difficult client, not for motivation, I don't really operate that way, more as a reference point. A reminder that the work lands somewhere real, that the numbers I spend my days modeling eventually translate into a payroll going out on time and 300 people getting paid for the work they did. That is what the job is for. The plaque is the acknowledgement. The email is the point. Nate and Camille's wedding invitation came in a cream envelope with both their names in a clean, modern font that Camille clearly chose herself. It is sitting on my kitchen counter next to my mail organizer. The RSVP deadline was 2 weeks ago. I haven't sent it back. I haven't decided yet. Not because I don't know what I want. Because I'm still working out what attendance means. Not for them. For what version of that room I'd be walking into. Camille deserves a wedding where every person there is actually present. I'm figuring out whether I can be that, in a room that also contains my mother, on a day that is supposed to be about Nate and Camille and not about any of the things that happened last November. I think I probably go. Nate is my brother. That's a fact that doesn't change because of another fact. And Camille seems like a person who will be good for him. Who will ask him the questions I have watched our mother never think to ask, who will expect him to account for himself in a way he has not always been held to. That's a gift. I hope he receives it right. I'm going to send the RSVP this week. Yes, 1. No dietary restrictions. I'll bring a card and a gift, and I'll shake his hand at the altar and mean it. What I will not do is serve at the bar. When you model cash flow for a living, you learn one thing above everything else. The variable that looks stable is almost always the one that costs you. I let a rent arrangement run for 2 years without examining it, because examining it felt like a conversation I didn't want. I removed that variable last September. I ran the numbers, sent the wire, filed the confirmation, and put it in my work bag. I did not tell anyone. I just made the move and went back to work. If you've been letting something run without examining it because the examination feels harder than the cost, you already know what I'm about to say. The math doesn't change because you're not looking at it. It just compounds. Drop it in the comments if this one landed somewhere specific. And if you know someone carrying a variable they didn't sign up for, send this to them. Sometimes the best thing you can do is show them that the confirmation already exists. They just have to print it out.